All right, first, just an introduction. Keith Dicharry with BASF Corporation. My fan club is sitting right down here in the second two rows. Thank you, Mike, Glenn. Been with the company for 32 plus years now. Started when I was 8 years old, just in case any of y'all question how young I look. So I knew that was in a bunch of y'all minds. So I'm gonna start off by telling you just a little bit of a story. So most of you probably flew here, for the most part. Well, we're changing something on your flight back home, okay? We're changing, and it's gonna be completely autonomous planes. You've got autonomous airlines. So you will be boarding flights that no longer have pilots on it. You will be boarding flights that basically have a work crew on it and yourself. And we're gonna fly you. If something starts to happen, air traffic control tower is gonna make a remote access to the plane and change the direction, get you out of turbulence. And God forbid if something really starts to go wrong with autopilot, which has never happened in the history of the airline industry, they will take over control, just like running a video game. They'll do that from air traffic control, and they'll just pass you on from tower to tower if you're flying across the United States. So basically, you got really nothing to worry about on your flight home. I didn't know if y'all knew Orlando was switching to that when you flew here, but that is exactly what you're going to be having on the way back. So I think your question about Lyft and Uber, I think, you don't have a choice. You got to get in the empty airplane. No pilot's going to be there. So the reason I bring this up is actually for 2 points about how to look at autonomous plants, okay? The whole purpose behind this is if you take a outlook of autonomous operations and you go full autonomous operations, and that's where you start your mindset, we can lead to a situation where we put our operators, our people in production units at a high risk. There's always failures. We talk about, the comment was made that, with the car, you don't have the human anymore, so you don't have the human error factor. Well, guess what? All we do when we do automation is we take the human factor one step away, is what we do. There's still a human that's programming the automation. That human still can make a mistake. We see it all the time with, in the airline industry, you see it all the time with the autopilot. Sometimes it has to be taken over because there's a glitch. Something went wrong. It couldn't handle a situation. It wasn't, it was an abnormal situation that was not foreseen, and somebody has to manually take it over. So what happens on this airplane on your flight home, if that happens and there's nobody, somebody has to take over the plane manually, and there's nobody in the air traffic control tower that can actually remember how to exactly fly the plane, because he hadn't had to do it. He hadn't had to do it in 20 years. What happens to the plane? Well, hopefully your flight won't end up like the picture. Hopefully my flight won't end up like the picture. But we got to take a realistic look at what do we want to do with autonomous operations. And I don't use this example to say stop doing it. It's the approach that we need to take. And I think it's kind of the approach, not kind of, it's the approach that we're looking into and what we're doing within BASF. So to give you a little bit about what I'm talking about is, I like to use the phrase right-sizing automation for our production units. So one of the first things for us that we need to understand as a team, automation team, is we need to understand where the business unit wants to go. What do they want to do? And then start to lay out a plan as to how we get there. What parts do we need to automate? So what is the risk versus reward? You're going to hear me say a lot about risk, because that is what we really need to be doing when we talk about removing people one level further back from actually our production units, which is a good thing. If you see up here on my slide, one of the first items, sub-bullets, is reducing exposure in related tasks. I think it's one of the key things we look at when we go into our plants is how can we reduce that risk factor? How can we take an operator and get him out of the way of harm? And so we look at that as an opportunity to basically automate something and get us one step closer. There's many things, there's many topics that you brought up, there's many topics that all of us need to bring up. We do want to minimize human error. We want to get rid of the human error in our production units. We want to look at opportunities to automate to increase quality. When you take away some of the human error, especially in our batch plants, you find that you are able to keep the quality at a higher level. That's why most of our batch plants are pretty much in cycles and they run on good batch programs, because we want to keep the high quality. We can do further in that. And then the big key for us, I think, and we learned this lesson, we've done, I guess, I'm going to use the term again, although I don't like it, autonomous operations. We've done that at a couple of our sites across Europe. The one I'm most familiar with is Schwarzheide. And we've had a lot of success in that plant. And a lot of times, and the guy sitting in the third row in the middle, Mike Moody, always comes to me and he says, Keith, what is your definition of autonomous operations? And I say, basically, I think the same answer I'm going to give you is where our business units want us to take them in automation. That's really what it is. I don't have a firm definition from BASF to tell you that autonomous plants mean that there is nobody inside the fence line and everybody is away from the plant and somebody's controlling it at Starbucks around the corner. That's not what the definition is. The definition stays for me around what does that business unit want to do within BASF? Where do they want to get to, and how do I get them there from an automation standpoint? The trend you had showed up there earlier was perfect. I mean, where do we end up landing? Do we ever land at the very top, fully autonomous operation? I don't know. We didn't get there with Schwarzheide, but I tell you what, we got a long way with that plant right now of reducing risk and increasing our quality, increasing our production rates and everything by doing what we did from an automation standpoint. I think we got to keep a key goal on there. So that process you see up here is kind of very general, but that really is what we follow. We basically sit down with our operations groups. We talk about where they want to be, what are the things that they want to try to achieve, and then we work it a piece at a time. So when I talk about the example in Schwarzheide, we started right at the base layer of control. Now that doesn't sound like autonomous operations, but that's where you have to start. You got to clear up everything at the base level of control. Then you got to automate systems that are not automated. And then you start looking for advanced optimization of those automated sequences. So I think this is my last slide, if I remember right. This is how we look at the focus. This is the focus, at least our mindset is, and other companies may have different mindsets, and that's what I like being here for, because I can hear them and bring that to our team. But this is kind of what we focus on. We're focusing on safety and security. We want to avoid those unintended consequences. So in other words, I don't want to develop something fully automated and then end up with something that's programmed now that's going to end up being a glitch down the road, just like I talked about autopilot. So we want to avoid that. So we want to make that risk assessment. We want to do and make sure that we add in value and not increasing risk beyond the value add. We want to focus on the overall plant performance. I talked about it earlier, production rates and quality. So what does the business unit need to get? What is their goals as a business? Then we need to drive that when we automate things. How can we help them? Maybe the answer is no, we can't. There's nothing further we can do for you there until you do an expansion. That could be the answer. Could be further automation. We want to eliminate pain points. So you want to sit down with operators and you want to find out what pain points are. Starting up a unit, that might be a pain point. Man, we fight this thing tooth and nail. It takes us 8 hours to get the plant up and running stable. That may be something we can take out of his hands and do automation for. So those are the kind of things. And then last but not least, it's kind of a funny statement down there, but we want to focus on further automating the automation. So we want to start thinking about things like artificial intelligence. What can we do? You can have a driverless car, a pilotless plane. Why can't we have a section where we do a little section of the plant where we do some artificial intelligence and nobody really needs to touch it and monitor it? The one risk factor I'll leave you with that you always need to consider if you're doing a risk assessment, at least that's our viewpoint, is knowledge. Yes, we're losing our ability and our operators who have this knowledge base. We run chemical plants. We have to be very cognizant of the fact that we can't lose complete knowledge of the plant. Just like autopilot fails, it had a glitch. When we program and we automate, it can have a glitch. We all know that. And there's got to be people with the knowledge of what to do in that production unit should all automation fail. And it's not just the safety system. A lot of people I talk to say, well, that's why we got a SIS black box safety system. Can't be just that. We don't want to crash the plant every time we lose automation. We want to still be able to get production. We'll go out of business if we just say, all right, SIS is going to take us out every time. If we do that, we're going to kill our business units. So got to keep a focus on that. And the red arrow at the bottom is basically my message, I guess, in closing. Don't focus on fully autonomous operation. Focus on what you can do to further automate and continue doing that process until you get to the point like we had the success in Schwarzheide. It's not a plant that runs by itself, but I can tell you what, it has a lot less human interaction to make production. And that is it.